welcome to the Act Up podcast, where we interview industry professionals who act down. My name is Raven Drummer. I'm the casting director, and I have the privilege, the utter privilege of having next to me one of the premier best casting directors, not only in the Southeast, just in the country, Mr. Mark Fincannon. How are you today?
I am so good.
Yes, give it up for Mark Fincannon.
Yes, sir. What a privilege it is to be here.
Yes.
Truly.
Let me tell you, Mark, I've been on panels with you. I've gotten a chance to talk to you, and you always inspire me. Like, you know, I know, like, and oftentimes we're talking to actors, but I listen to you, and I'm like, I'm always inspired by your story, where you've been, and what you have to say. You're such a gem. And so thank you, one, for coming on the podcast. I have so much respect for you, for the things that you've done in the Southeast community and beyond for all these years. So I just wanted to give you your flowers a little bit in the beginning and just say thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, it's hard to follow that up. But truly, I've always been humbled by your work as well from afar, and I felt like I knew you before I knew you.
Yes,
you know? And so when we did meet, it was like old home week in a weird way,
Yeah, right.
though we had never met.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah.
I love that. So I want this to be like casting director to casting director. And I'll say even artist. You know, let me take that back. I want this to be artist to artist. Because I think it's easy for us to kind of live in that title of casting director. But at the end of the day, we really are artists. And there is an artistry to what we do. And I don't really know of a lot of, you know, casting directors who speak to each other as artists. And that's absolutely how I see you as an artist and what you do. So you started off as an actor, is that correct?
A dancer.
A dancer, that's what it is. Even better, yes.
So I grew up in a small town in North Carolina, and yet in the center of downtown there was a single house. And when you went through the door, there was a wall with mirrors and a ballet bar. And there was a man there by the name of Gene Stroud, and he had Gene Stroud Studio. And my mother took my sister and I there when I was 6 years old to do tap, jazz, and ballet.
Wow.
So for 2 or 3, 4 years, I guess, 6 to 10 or 11, every Friday afternoon after school, I went and did ballet for 30 minutes, jazz for 30 minutes, tap for 30 minutes. And I mean, I always enjoy looking back on that and thinking and realizing that that's really what influenced me to think about interpretation of material.
Yeah.
Right? Because dance, you're taking a form of music and then you're interpreting a style of movement to that dance to create a piece, right? A creative piece. So I think that just kind of unlocked something for me. And then in high school, we had a really good drama program, and I just enjoyed it so much. When I went to college, I got involved in the theater program in college, but not really because I saw a career ahead, because in North Carolina, theater was well respected, and there was a real appreciation of theater. But film and television was not even in a conversation.
Absolutely.
Now, my brother and I did discover our father had an 8mm movie camera that he would use for home movies, you know, with the big bright lights. And so I think we found ourselves picking that up one day and going into the backyard and creating a war movie, you know, with ketchup and army helmets and bazookas. And then from there, we did a movie called Snoopy Goes to the Moon. And when I look back on that, I realized during the 60s, and I'm not sure how many of your listening audience remembers the 60s, but that's how old I am. But in the 60s, during that entire decade, we were involved in Vietnam War. So that's why we would have filmed a war movie.
Right.
Also during the 60s, we were going to the moon.
Yeah.
From 61 or 63, Kennedy said, I want to be on the moon by the end of the decade. Well, we were on the moon in July of 1969.
Yeah.
And then the Peanuts animation cartoon was the #1 cartoon in the world during the 60s.
Yeah.
So it made sense of how this all came together as I look back on it. But that's really what just, we loved telling stories. We loved playing make-believe, right?
Yeah.
And we enjoyed watching an audience enjoy what we were making.
I love that.
And so for the film industry to happen to come to North Carolina shortly after I got out of college, and how we got involved is truly a God thing, because there's no way we could have strategically said, we're going to go work in the film business for the next 45 years of our lives. And there's just no way we could have done that. Doors just opened, and when they did, we stepped in and, like pioneers, just said, let's forge a trail, and we'll keep forging a trail as far as we can go.
I love that. And I want to talk about that. So you start off as a dancer, and I had a director that said dancers think with their bodies. And I love that. And it's so interesting, because you see that their thought process is really in their arms and legs and torso. But anyway, so one, have you ever lived in LA, or has all of your career been North Carolina?
Totally North Carolina.
I love that. Same thing with me. I've never lived or worked, actually lived in LA, but everything has been in Georgia. Yeah. So what was that transition? So you graduate college.
So
and then,
listen, I don't know how much time you have, but my junior year in college, 6 of our students decided during spring break we were going to jump on the train in North Carolina and go to New York.
Oh, wow.
Spend 4 days there, get back on the train, and come back.
Yeah.
We went to this crazy midnight movie. Now, most of your listeners probably don't remember midnight movies, but there was a period of time from the late 70s into the early 80s, probably about a 7-year period of time, when there was a fad across America that was called midnight movies. And you would go to the movies at midnight and get out at 2 or 2:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Well, the lingo within the industry was they were kind of stoner movies. They were those people who'd get stoned and want to go to the movies at midnight.
Yeah.
So they were always art films of some sort. Anyway, I ended up in the Village in New York, where I saw this outrageous musical called the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Oh, wow.
Okay?
Yeah.
And they were acting out these characters in front of the screen. I'd never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Well, I came back to Charlotte. My brother, Craig, is 3 years older than I am.
Yeah.
And Craig had majored in theater as well. When he got out of college, he was working as an assistant manager at a local movie theater. Well, they were doing midnight movies there. And just over a beer one weekend, I said, Craig, you've got to try and track down this Rocky Horror movie, because it's the perfect midnight movie. Yeah. Again, to make a long story short, he couldn't even get a print originally, because no one thought that anybody in the South would want to see this movie.
Right.
But they called him 3 weeks later and said, we have a print. Do you want it? And he said, yes. Screened it. It sold out for the next 2.5 years.
Oh, my gosh.
Every weekend at that theater. And then that's what took it across the nation, because it was so, I didn't know
that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It would not have left New York or London or Chicago, some of the art houses, unless it was successful in the South,
in North
in
Carolina.
the Bible Belt.
I love that. I love that.
But what that did, and what I'm forgetting to tell you is that when I graduated, because of that, I graduated 2 months later, and Craig said, hey, the studios want to hire us to help them promote their movies. So we started a promotion and publicity company. That's how we started in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wow.
And the studios would hire us to send out press kits to all the radio stations, newspapers across North and South Carolina. They would fly the actors in. We'd take them, do a morning show, and then do a lunch where we would have all the print media come in and meet our actors and talk about the movie.
Yeah.
And then it would get articles in the newspaper about the movie that they didn't have to pay for, right?
Yeah.
It was promotional kind of work.
Yeah.
So we thought that's really where our career was going to go, that we were going to be, basically promoters of movies in the Carolinas. And a movie came to town in Charlotte while we were doing that, and it was called Stroker Ace. It was a Burt Reynolds, Lonnie Anderson comedy. And we got in line like everybody else to be extras.
Wow.
Well, we got cast as extras.
Wow.
Now, to bring this whole thing full circle, the extras casting director was a man named Strat Leopold. And Strat Leopold is from Georgia. He's out of Savannah, Georgia, and he was doing casting for extras here in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So when the movie came to Charlotte, there was nobody doing extras casting in Charlotte, so he came up and did extras casting. Well, Strauss Leopold has gone on to produce Star Wars. I mean, he's got quite a resume himself. But he was the extras casting director that hired us to be extras. Well, because we were promoting movies, we got a phone call from the publisher of the Charlotte Observer who said, I am a movie fan way back. And I've decided I want to bring Frank Capra to Charlotte, and I want to screen his movie that won all 5 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director. It was called It Happened One Night. It starred Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. And Mr. Capra's going to come to town, and he's going to answer questions after the movie's over. Well, for us, that was Steven Spielberg. I mean, it was, you know, Frank Capra did It's a Wonderful Life. You could look at his list. Mr. Deeds Goes to Washington. I mean, he was the biggest director in the history of our industry in the middle of last century. Well, he was in his 80s and coming to Charlotte. So we got to meet Frank Capra and do a night with him. Well, as God would orchestrate things, 3 weeks later, we hear through the grapevine that Frank Capra Jr., his son, who was 50, was down in Wilmington, North Carolina, scouting locations for a Stephen King book called Firestarter. And so because we had met his father, it gave us the confidence to try and track him down, get him on the phone and say, Mr. Capra, we met your dad 3 weeks ago. We are trained actors. We also have worked as extras, and we now have learned how to pull together extras. Would you let us come down? Would you consider hiring us to do extras casting on Firestarter? So Frank Capra Jr. hired us for that. His executive producer was Dino De Laurentiis. Dino De Laurentiis is the most successful independent filmmaker in the history of movies. He probably made 800 movies in his career. He was from Italy. The term spaghetti western basically Dino created. Then when he came to the United States, because of his powerful ability to put together projects, he would go to the studios and negotiate deals of distribution with the studios. Then he would package the movies. Then he would pre-sell them in countries overseas. No one had ever heard of this. Now it's normal fare for independent film. But Dino created all this. Anyway, the beauty of this story at that point is that Dino De Laurentiis, while spending time in Wilmington, fell in love for the second time in his life. And the woman that he fell in love with was really in our accounting department, but she was really a born producer herself. And so because we were in Wilmington, if you've not been to Wilmington, North Carolina, it's on the coast. And Wrightsville Beach is a beach right off the coast, and it is breathtakingly beautiful. So Martha said to Dino, they got married, and Martha said to Dino, it's time to stop touring all over the world. Let's build a big house here on the beach of North Carolina. Let's buy the property that we filmed Firestarter on, and you take your resume to the stock market, create a company, and let's just start making movies here. And within a year and a half, Dino had put together De Laurentiis Entertainment Group. They did a public offering, and they raised $270 million in 3 days in 1983. So over the next 3.5 years in Wilmington, Dino produced 23 feature films. And we did the extras casting on every one of them. And with each movie, they would say, we don't need these 5 one-line players to come from Chicago or New York or L.A. Do you know actors? And we're going, well, yeah, this is our state. We've been involved in theater. So let us start pulling together actors. And, you know, along with that, Dino brought, these directors were Michael Mann, Michael Cimino, David Lynch, Bruce Beresford. If you look back at the resumes of these directors, they were the finest feature directors in the world. Because that's the only people that Dino ever hired. Best production designers, costume designers, and they all converged on this little town in Wilmington. And then we did it, and then Andy Griffith was doing a show called Matlock. which started in Georgia, went to L.A., and then Andy was ready to retire. And they said, well, where are you going? He said, I'm moving back to my home, North Carolina. And they said, well, what if we move the show to North Carolina? Would you do another season? So he said, sure, I'll look into that. And they ended up doing seasons 7, 8, and 9 of Matlock, 3 seasons of 22 episodes a season in Wilmington. And then that established for our industry the fact that television could very easily and done in North Carolina.
Yeah.
This was long before incentives. None of that was happening.
Right.
It's just that we could produce a product
Yeah.
that was at the highest caliber. So then we did a little pilot called Dawson's Creek. Well, it kind of got a little popular. That
Just
ran,
a little bit.
That
Yeah.
ran for 6 years. And so Michelle and Katie and all them, they grew up as young people in Wilmington, North Carolina.
Wow.
They look on that town very, very, as a special place for them, because really they lived there with us for a long time. Drew Barrymore, particular, Drew was the star of Firestarter. She ended up coming back and doing Cat's Eye. She did like 3-4 films before she was 12 years old in Wilmington.
Yeah.
And then One Tree Hill was kind of a reboot of Dawson's Creek in a different way, and it ran for 9 years. So we had 15 years of television in Wilmington.
Wow.
And then, things were happening all over the South, in New Orleans, in Atlanta, and it ebbed and flowed. I think we did 30 television movie of the weeks in 1 year.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it is. I look back on it, really, Raven, I don't, but God.
Yeah.
It really does not make sense. But my brother was in my office, and he fell in love early on in our careers, and his wife, Lisa May, joined us in 1988, so that's been an awful long time.
Wow.
So if she was doing 3 shows, I was doing 3, and Craig was doing 3, then there's 9 shows going on pretty regularly, and then you would go. So that's kind of how that whole thing just built up over time.
Yeah.
And there weren't a lot of other casting directors that were really trained, or certainly weren't living in Wilmington.
Absolutely.
Shay was here in Atlanta, forging everything here.
Yeah.
And and also I think I just have to share his name, because he's the one that probably inspired me more than anything, was Frank Capra Jr. We were doing a movie with Sissy Spacek and Jeff Daniels called Marie, A True Story. It was, in fact, a true story set in Tennessee. And Lynn Stallmaster was the casting director. Well, Lynn Stallmaster's name, he's the first casting director to ever have his name in the main titles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because casting directors were never there. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's how influential Lynn was. He was doing it before they really called this job a casting director job in a sense. But Lynn was he was from Nebraska, Lincoln, Nebraska, I think, and was just a Midwestern, beautiful, artistic. He was probably 60 when I met him. He loved actors, Raven.
Yeah.
I mean, and the stereotype before I met Lynn was the cold, the cold person behind the desk, telling the actor to do their thing while they're not even looking at just all the stereotypes. So thankfully, just watching Lynn love on actors. And Lynn was that guy who would come into Charlotte. If we were doing a movie in Charlotte and he had already cast his leads in L.A., he would do an open call.
Yeah.
He'd put an article in the newspaper, and 1,000 people would show up on a Saturday.
Wow.
So we would be out front kind of calling them through and signing them in and taking their pictures. But Lynn would sit in that room, meet them one by one by one.
That is incredible.
And out of 1,000, he'd find 10 gems.
Yeah.
No one ever knew about, never heard, never saw.
Yeah.
And you also, if you go back, Raven, I mean, I'm so far back there that really we had no agencies.
Right.
There was the Jan Thompson agency in Charlotte, and she was there because there were plenty of commercials that were being filmed there. Certainly there was AMT, Kathy Hardigree was here. Misty's mom, Gail Houghton, was here. People Store started a couple of years after.
Yep.
I think she started mid-'80s, and we kicked off about 83. And I remember having my very first dinner with Rebecca, literally back in 85, saying, what do you think of People Store? That sounds nice. But really, so many of the actors throughout the Southeast I found through literally doing open calls because it was, and Lynn forged the way to kind of say, Mark, there's talent everywhere.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to go out and do all the hard work to have them come in, and you know it when you see it.
I love that you have seen this. Like, I feel like you've seen the birth of the industry here in the South, period, you know? Yeah. And so I love that you're on the forward end of that, and to see what it has blossomed into now is amazing.
Never imagine.
In college, what did you think you'd be doing?
Oh, that's a great question. I think probably then I dreamed of doing a chorus line on Broadway.
Oh, that's such a good one. Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And I certainly wanted to direct it or be Zach in it while I was in college, but the rights never, it was too long. It was too early for me to be able to do it away from New York. But, I'm not a great singer. I could probably act through certain songs and certain shows, but I was not the singing voice. But I always loved dance, of course, and I always loved, just the bringing people to life in the seats out there. Yeah. There's nothing like live theater. I mean, at the end of the day, there's nothing like live theater, and so excited that I'm 5 minutes away from what's going to be a beautiful 2,200-seat theater in Fayetteville.
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be amazing.
There's no telling what we're going to see in that space.
Yeah. Do you view being a casting director as a ministry?
Well, it's morphed that way, and the reason that it has is because my own personal life was so really dramatically changed in 1988 that as I grew in my own faith, and it just simply, overflows into my work. Yeah. I do think I'm more creative because I have a connection to the ultimate creator. Yeah. Ooh. When I walk outside every morning, I see creativity on levels. I hear the birds, I smell the new plants, and when it's what then opens the creativity within me with whatever challenge I'm faced with on that given day.
I love that. And I love what you said about creativity as well. How do you balance? Because I think sometimes with being casting, so casting is absolutely creative, but it's also administrative too. Yeah. Is there an aspect? I like the creative part of casting more. Yeah. What about you? How do you feel about it?
100%. I couldn't do my job without my unbelievable associates. But truly, the first 20 years, it was like a carny. We always joke our industry is much like being involved in the carnival. Yes. Wherever they go set up, that's where you go. Absolutely. And you operate under the circumstances of where the carnival is this week, right?
Yes.
So, but I had to learn early on all the, Screen Actors Guild rules and regulations, all the scheduling issues. And I did most of it myself for the first 25 years. But as we got into much deeper into principal casting, doing whole shows and things like that, it became paramount to have a great associate.
Absolutely.
I can't say enough things about the job of casting associates.
How do you keep yourself creatively fresh? And what I mean by that is, like, I remember Reuben Cannon. I read this article a long time ago, but he approached casting, and he would say, like, he would try to go to, I think, one play a month. He would try to watch one new film a week. And I want to say, like, a certain amount of television. Okay. And that was his way of keeping abreast of, like, who the actors were and things like that. And tapped into his own creativity. So how do you stay creatively fresh, especially because you've been doing this for 40 years? Yeah.
It's, I don't know, every script is like opening a new world.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, Raven, I've thought about this quite a lot. I've had time to think about it. because of all the body of work that I've had the privilege to work on, and so much of it was recreating historical events.
Yeah.
Like From the Earth to the Moon,
Yeah.
which was that and who would have ever imagined that? I just told you a story about us making a movie about the moon. Well, we won the Emmy for a series that Tom Hanks and Ron Howard did called From the Earth to the Moon. Who would have ever imagined in a million years? And I have a whole God story behind that event that had nothing to do with Emmys. It had to do with just how unbelievable God is. But
He said, tell it.
Oh, wow. I really do want to condense it as much as I can here because it can get long. But I found myself in 1994, it's something like that, going on a men's retreat with like 50 men in the North Georgia mountains, oddly enough, for a weekend. And we were going to whitewater raft. And when we arrived, we couldn't find dead wood anywhere because it was at a typical state park. And in October, they start picking up wood every weekend to build fires. So if you don't go in the early weekends, by the time you get there, there's no wood. Now, you'll understand why I'm telling this story when I finish it. So we would have to get in the van, go down the bottom of the mountain, bring wood up to, build our fire. And while we were looking for a place to put the fire, I found a little natural chapel that had been built like 100 yards from the state park.
Oh, wow.
Had benches and had a cross at the top of the benches. So we all looked at each other and said, hey, we got to do communion here on Sunday morning before we all go back.
Yeah.
And the weekend had been incredible because, truthfully, even though it was a Christian men's gathering for the weekend, we never read the Bible. We just listened to one another. We prayed for one another. We cried with one another. We laughed a lot. So come Sunday morning, we're sitting there and the sun's coming. It was beautiful. And I happened to have my Bible in my lap. And I just said, guys, it's such a beautiful morning. Would you be all right if I just read from the scriptures? And I hadn't prepared anything. We had certainly prayed, but I hadn't prepared anything.
Yeah.
And I read this, if you'll let me do this.
Of course, of course.
And again, this was not pre-set up.
Yeah. Is it a scripture?
Yeah,
Okay.
It is a scripture. And it's Jesus talking. He said, I'm the true grapevine, my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch of mine that doesn't produce fruit, and he prunes the branches that do bear fruit so they can produce even more. You've already been pruned and purified by the message that I have given you. Remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it's severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, says Jesus, I am the vine, and you are the branches. And those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. And anyone who does not remain in me is thrown away like a useless branch and withers. Such branches are then just gathered into a pile to be burned. But if you remain in me and my words remain in you, you may ask for anything you want and it will be granted. Well, because the wood had been such a significant part of our weekend, and it comes up in the scripture, and the scripture is all about remaining in the Spirit of Christ and Him being in us. Well, 6 years later, I get the phone call to go do From the Earth to the Moon in Orlando. I get down there. I've been there about 4 days. And at this time, I had two daughters. One was 5 and one was 3. And I was also leading a drama team of youth, of teenagers in my church community. But I had just up one day said, hey, I got a job in Orlando. I'll see you in 9 months.
Yeah.
And that's a bit broad, but I was back and forth.
Yeah.
But I got down there, and it was everything I imagined it to be. We were shooting at the Disney MGM studios.
Nice.
We were in the bungalows behind the fence at Disney MGM studios.
Yeah.
They got me a condo nearby, and it was everything I imagined it to be. But by night 3, I wanted to go home.
Wow.
I miss my kids. I miss my wife. I miss my church community.
Yeah.
It was kind of like I was holding sand in my hands, and sand in your hands you can't hold because it goes through the cracks in your fingers. But you do everything you can to hold on to it. That's so often, I think, in life we we think this is going to be it, and then it ends up being disappointing, or it's not what you think it could be. So in that regard, I'm having a bit of a pity party, and I feel like God whispered to me that, you're the guy who tells everybody that I'm in control of all things. And if you're here and you believe you're here because I've sent you here, not because you came here, then open your eyes and get your nose out of your navel, so to speak. Well, the next morning I go to the production office and I said, I picked up a script. The very first script, we never shoot anything in order. So we're shooting episode 7. And it is the actual moon landing script. I take the script, go back to my condo, I'm reading through it, and as I'm reading through the script, it's talking about the 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Mike Collins. And Mike Collins was going to be orbiting the moon while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin go land on the moon. Well, the whole episode is about the fact that Buzz Aldrin is a very spiritual man, and he wants to know if he's going to be the first one to step on the moon because he wants to prepare for some great spiritual statement that he might make. And he, even in the episode, it says he goes to see his priest to say, once he found out that he's not going to be the first one on the moon, he was really thinking that God had let him down. He believed since he was a young boy that one day he was going to have the whole world listening in to him. Well, as it turns out, we all know Neil Armstrong was the first man to step on the moon. Well, in this episode, I get to a place where they just landed on the moon, mission control, the co-pilot of the lunar module, Buzz Aldrin, goes on the radio. The whole world is listening in. And he says, mission control, this is co-pilot. And that was played by Breaking Bad.
I know. The guy who did Your Honor. Brian Cranston.
Bryan Cranston.
Sorry,
So it's Bryan Cranston. So Bryan Cranston in this moment says, I think we need to pause for 1 minute. Wherever you are in the world, whatever you're doing, pause and let's just give thanks for this amazing accomplishment. Over, they say over. The world is silent for that 1 minute. No one knows what took place in that capsule, but I'm sitting here reading it off the page. And he unzips his personal preference kit, which is in his left upper thigh pocket. He pulls out a white napkin. He opens the napkin, sets a chalice on the dash, sets a wafer on the dash, takes wine, pours wine into the chalice, and then has a little card. And he reads from this card. And it says, I'm the vine, you're the branches.
Wow.
If you remain in me, then I'll remain in you, but apart from me, you can do nothing. I go, I'm the vine, you're the branches. It's not I'm the vine, you're the branches. It's I'm the vine, you're the branches. I would have never known that had I not had that experience. Oh, I left out even more of an unbelievable story. I'm stepping back to Sunday. We had that morning. I read that scripture. Monday morning in my office in Wilmington, North Carolina, I'm sitting in my back office. My secretary comes in and says, hey, Mark, there's a David Aldrich here to visit you. Do you know him? And I said, yeah, David, I haven't seen him in 5 years. He went off to Russia to be a missionary or something. What's he doing here? He came back. He sat down in my office. And we're just talking. He's telling me about his trip over there. And I said, well, what else is going on? He said, I'm really grieved. And I said, what are you grieved about? And he said, well, there's Christian bookstores popping up everywhere. And people are reading every book imaginable except the Bible. There's a self-help book for this, for that, for this, for that, for this. But no one's reading the Bible. Now, this was back in like 1994. And I said, you know what, I agree with you. Do you feel like God is telling you to do something? He said, as a matter of fact, he is. And I said, what's that? He said, I'm going to start doing bumper stickers.
Wow.
And I said, and I wish I'd brought it because you would have to see it to believe it, okay? But he pulled out a legal pad and he had 50 quirky sayings and then a scripture verse to the right of it. And you would sometimes have to look up the scripture verse to understand what the saying meant. Well, then he reaches down into his bag and he had one of those 50 produced and he laid it on my desk. And it said, fruit happens. And then below it, it said John 15, 1 through 17.
Wow.
To the verse, what I'd read the day before.
Wow.
The reason I had to go back is because I've had that bumper sticker on the back of my car from 1994 to 1998 when I'm in Orlando, Florida. And now I'm reading, I'm the wine, you're the branches, not I'm the vine, you're the branches. Well, then I close it up and I say, I got to go to the production office. I got to go see the writers because this is too important.
Yeah.
People know Scripture too well. And this goes down forever, right? So when I went in there, I said, where are they getting their resource materials? She said, well, right over there's a little library of books, and the main book is called The Man in the Moon. It's right there. And I go and I pull the book, The Man in the Moon. I have a copy of this at my home. It's that thick hardback copy. I started flipping through it. I got to chapter 7, and in chapter 7 is this story about Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin. And right there in the middle of the page, it says, I'm the wine, you're the branches. I'm the wine, you're the branches. So they just lifted it out of that book and put it in their script. Yeah. Well, this guy who wrote this book was not really familiar with biblical stuff, but I did a deeper research, and I found the handwritten note that Buzz Aldrin wrote down what he was going to say to Mission Control while in the lunar module.
Oh, my gosh.
And his writing is not very good, and you can easily think it says, I'm the wine, you're the branches.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, they were so receptive to me going into the writer's room and having that conversation and all that. And so all of that coming after a night when I was like, I think I'm in the wrong place. You know, God just kind of, I don't know. That was like a kiss.
Yeah.
And so to then 9 months later say, hey, you've been nominated for an Emmy, go to Pasadena. I'm like, wait a minute, I already won my reward, you know?
Right.
And anyway, thank you for indulging me on that story.
No, that's good.
There's so many of those that maybe one day you can help me create a book because we really, this all needs to be.
Do you have a project?
Shared.
You mentioned this film, but do you have a favorite project that you've cast? And then you don't have to name names for the second one. Do you have a project that you a not so favorite one? So I mean, one that I almost want to say you reluctantly cast, or one that felt like a struggle.
I've had so many incredible ones, to work with Barbra Streisand every day for 3 months to do The Prince of Tides was certainly certainly a dream, beyond a dream, honestly. Yeah. But I had heard a story about these 5 missionary couples in their 20s who all joined a nonprofit called Wycliffe Bible Translators. And this is a nonprofit that's been around for over 100 years. And their goal and their mission is that every human being on planet Earth will have access to the scriptures, Genesis to Revelation, in every language, in every people group around the world. So young people, couples in their 20s, go live their entire lives, 30-year lives with indigenous people. Oh, wow. And if they don't have an alphabet, they create an alphabet for them. Yeah. And then they began translating a written version of the Holy Scriptures for that people group. So there were 5 couples that went down into Ecuador to do this in the early 1950s. And while they were translating for an Indian tribe called the Quechua. And while in the midst of doing that over several years, one day they have a couple of Quechua flying in the little plane with them over the Amazon jungle. And one of them starts yelling, Alka, Alka. And the missionary says, what is that? And technically the translation is, those are violent, naked savages who kill anyone that comes near them. And with this missionary's heart, he just kind of said, wow. They're killing because they don't know any other way. And they're in the middle of the jungle. Yeah. Maybe if there's some way we can make contact with them, we can help them understand there is a way to forgive and lay down and, and not live under fear and revenge. Yeah. So over the next 13 weeks, they dropped gifts down to this village. And on the 13th week, the village sent a gift out back to them.
Wow.
So there was this open door, and they landed their little plane nearby, and these 5 men sat there day after day waiting, hoping they could make contact. And one day they do make contact. 2 ladies and a man come out. They spend the day together, and they radio their wives. Are ecstatic about it. And they said, we're just going to wait here because we believe they're going to bring the whole tribe, the leaders of the village down so we can carry on our communication. And 3 days later, the whole tribe rush attacked them and spear killed all of them on the beach.
Wow.
This was 1956, and so it made international news very quickly. But the most amazing part of the story is one of the wives and one of the sisters of those 5 men, within 9 months, moved in and lived with the tribe that killed their husband and brother.
Oh, my gosh.
And the sister stayed in that tribe for the next 40 years and died among them as a saint among them. And the wife stayed for 5 years, and she had a little 4-year-old, little blonde-haired, blue-eyed little girl that was living with this tribal people in the jungles of Ecuador. Well, it did change that tribe forever, and it changed all of their, the same, they're called the Auca Indians, but so anyway, I had heard this story, and I was so blown away by the story of forgiveness, because that's really what they lived it. Here's a sister and a husband and a wife who were loving on the people that killed their family members.
Yeah.
That is the living example of what it is to authentically forgive.
Yeah.
And anyway, I got a phone call in 2002 saying that they're making that into a movie and they want me to cast it. And they didn't even know where they were going to do it. Well, we ended up in Panama. Wow. And I ended up getting in a canoe and going up into the rainforest of Panama.
Wow.
And I found indigenous people groups.
Oh, my gosh.
That I then spoke to through translators.
Wow.
And went to 3 different villages and got like 7 or 8 speaking actors out of those villages. And then we had a school for a month.
Wow.
Where we I brought in, professional movement coaches to just break down inhibitions and create a free, open space to be creative. The name of the movie is called End of the Spear, if any of you would want to see it. Yeah. It's easy, it's fun and kind of easy to talk about now, but when you look back on what the challenge that was in front of me, but I will say that if I didn't believe that God called me to this project, I would have never been able to do it.
The fact that casting has led you to the jungles of Panama is amazing, too.
Yeah,
so,
exactly. And I'm thinking, hey, he's doing that. I'm just hands and feet.
Right, exactly.
Y'all tell me where to go, and then I'll look. And lo and behold, there was a people group that, in Panama that looked very much like the Indians. And the wild part is the men who killed that day were in their 70s, still living in Ecuador, and some of the most beautiful, kind human beings you've ever met in your life.
Wow.
Well, we flew them from Ecuador up to Panama to meet the actors that were going to play them.
My goodness.
Well, you can imagine they were a little nervous when these guys showed up in their village because, really they were in their former lives or in their former ways were killers.
That's amazing.
But they are incredible people now. So anyway, it was, I actually, Raven, I'm surprised I've never sent you this. When I got back from doing that, I had an intern in my office who was in the film school at UNCW there in Wilmington. And he said, I know I want to be an editor and I'm a senior and I've got to turn in a senior project.
Yeah.
And so I need to do something that I could edit. I either need to go shoot some footage to edit or I need to find some footage that I can't edit. And I go, ping, I have like 12 hours from the time I flew to Panama the very first time, all the way through the casting process, all the way through to the end. Would you be interested in taking that 12 hours of stuff and going through it?
Yeah.
And 3 months later, he showed up with a 16-minute casting of Into the Spear that you would really love to see, and maybe your viewers would.
That's amazing.
I think you can find it through Vimeo or something. But anyway, it's casting Into the Spear, which truly was
that's incredible.
Beyond,
I love that.
Yeah.
What is the biggest lesson that you feel like you've learned from actors? Being that you've watched millions of auditions.
That very few of us really listen.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, even when we're listening, we're formulating what we're going to be saying.
Yes, I feel you. Yes, absolutely.
I did a acting seminar last Saturday with, 22 students, and I came across this. I'll send this to you too. This Ernest Hemingway writing, where he talks about just being aware all the time. You go into a room, you need to be. If you left the room, and I said, "Hey, what pictures were on the wall? What was the smell in there? Was there a spiritual atmosphere, or was it dark, or was it light, or whatever?" If you're really an aware person, then you're aware of all those things. You're aware of every person in the room. You're aware of who kind of looks at you with a smile, who has a smirk. You're just living in what Patsy, I guess, Rodenberg calls second circle.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard that instruction
absolutely.
form, but second circle is just being fully present.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is what I really work at doing too. I'm not the best listener in the world, so it takes real practice to do that.
Yeah.
But I think the best actors are the best listeners.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. Fincannon Casting, which is the name of your casting company, has been so monumental, I think, to definitely the Southeast for sure. What's next for you all in terms of, I know that the industry is, here we go again, lots of changes. People are there's a lot of fears about things feeling different, studios not producing as much as they used to. But where do you see you all growing and evolving?
Wow, great question. It gives me the opportunity to brag on Lisa May, my sister-in-law, who I do anytime I can. I think she's the greatest casting director on the planet. She's a workaholic. She's creative, she's talented, she's lovely, she loves people, she loves actors. But she really is a creative artist. I've always viewed what we do as kind of like painting. Every film I pick up a white canvas and basically I'm putting it on an easel and you're taking this color and you're throwing it up there and a little of this color and a little of that color and you might lighten this one or darken it. You're just doing that with people, but you're ultimately creating something that's going to be a finished work of art. But Lisa May, over the last 4 years, the producers from the Outer Banks, the Pate brothers, had an idea of bringing back rock and roll bands to high school space. Oh. We used to have rock and roll bands that would pop up in high schools all the time. Yeah. But that kind of went away.
Yeah.
Except that there's still a lot of musicians that are 17, 18, 19 years old that are playing electric guitars and basses and everything else. So she went out across the country looking for the best of.
Wow.
And had like 4,000 submissions of kids 17 to 19 years old that are the best musicians.
Wow.
And ended up putting together 5 rock and rollers that are from 5 different parts of America.
Wow.
Our drummer's from Atlanta.
Nice.
But she put together this incredible cast, non-actors, but during COVID, they trained with an acting coach all year long online. And by the time they got around to do their pilot, these guys were great musicians and really good actors.
Wow.
Beautifully diverse, the whole cast. Yeah. And they did a pilot, and Paramount Plus is crazy about it. It's coming out this summer.
Nice.
It's called The Runarounds. The band already has a following.
Nice.
And Lisa May, because of all that work and all that effort, is an executive producer on that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm not sure I necessarily want to go down that road. I think if the right story comes along and the funding's behind it, I would do that. Yeah. But I've been doing this so long now, Raven. There's certain days I'm just saying, you know what, I'm tired. It's finally just time to take the hat off, hang it up.
I understand.
But I do still love every opportunity, and I'm thankful to have every opportunity. And I even tell my directors, look, though I have done this for a long time, though I do know an awful lot of actors, I'm always looking for new actors that I don't know. But I approach every film as if I've never done one before.
Yeah, it's so good.
You know,
That's
because
so
you're just
good.
starting fresh, and you got to rely on. I rely on God. You know,
Yeah.
It's outside me.
Yeah, and it allows us, I think, as creatives to stay in that space of the unknown. And I
Yeah.
think the more that we do that, the better artists, the more we grow as well. So
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, well, I have questions that I ask every guest.
Okay.
You're no exception.
Yeah.
So my first question is, what has been your favorite age thus far, and why?
I think my current age, because I'm able to really reflect and look back, and I think I'm at much more peace now than I was certainly 10 years ago.
Yes.
Certainly when I was a teenager or in my 20s,
Yeah.
and all this stuff was kicking off. You know, I have 4 daughters. I have 12 grandkids.
Wow.
They are all exceptional. They're all amazing, and so, you know, just enjoying watching the legacy grow well beyond me is like a joy I've never known.
I love that. So if you weren't a casting director, what would you be doing?
Golfer.
Oh, that's so good.
I'd be playing the Masters.
Do you have a favorite golfer?
I guess Scotty Scheffler's hard not to. But I grew up literally walking the golf courses with Arnold Palmer.
My gosh.
Yeah, I was Arnie's Army. That's what they called us. Yeah.
You know, Mark, I've never played golf in my life.
Right.
But I used to watch it every single weekend, Thursday to Sunday.
No kidding.
I loved it. And so I haven't done it in a while, but I love just watching the game of it. So,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Do you prefer a brunch or a happy hour?
I like brunches.
Me
Yeah,
too.
I like brunches.
Do you have a favorite brunch meal?
Chicken and waffles.
Yes, we're in the South. What else? Yes. What do you love about doing casting, and particularly doing it here in Atlanta in the Southeast versus other regions?
Oh, well, I don't know LA. I just hear all the stories of my whole career from actors.
Yeah.
But I just love that we're family. I mean,
Yeah.
I've always considered us as, we're outside that big world.
Yeah.
We've been able to do our own and forge our own trail, and you don't do that alone.
Yeah.
You've heard me say this, Raven. We don't have a job if these actors aren't always working hard, always
Absolutely.
preparing and showing up time after time after time and not getting the gig,
Yeah.
but still coming back the next time we call them.
Yeah.
So we owe our lives to the actor.
Absolutely.
And they're the ones that are to be celebrated. So, I love actors. I love people.
Yes,
And
I love it.
And it's a world that's challenging. I mean, I don't know any. I was telling my grandson this week. I said that is the one job that is the most insecure job I think you could ever imagine stepping into. So
And
unless
to keep
you're
stepping into it
Yeah.
after rejection
Yeah.
is amazing. So
I didn't have it.
Right, I get it.
And I'm thankful that I was able to, kind of step behind the camera, but I still got to act every week because
Yeah.
we're playing the scenes
You
with our
read
actors.
with them. Yeah, absolutely. What's the most challenging thing that you've done lately?
Oh, wow. Well, I did a whole feature last year, about a year ago. It's coming out this summer. I think they're going to make an announcement in the next week or two. And of all these shows that we've talked about, I had never done a Western.
Oh, wow,
And
really?
it was a Western, and it's shot down in Florida on a 50,000 acre cattle ranch.
Yeah,
And just to kind of step in that world was a whole new trial.
nice.
At the end of the day, though, I think they're calling it Outer Banks meets Yellowstone because it's young people in their 20s who leave Georgia and they're either going west or south, and they head south into Florida in the 1880s.
Oh, okay.
And Florida had presented a lot of challenges, from gators to manatee to snakes to all kinds of stuff they didn't face going west. But,
wow.
yeah, Florida Wild, I guess, would have been my latest, greatest challenge.
Okay, awesome. And last question.
Yeah.
What makes you feel alive?
Scripture.
Mm,
There's just no other word that comes to mind.
Yeah.
And genuinely, as I read that Jesus got alone first thing in the morning before the sun was even up to hear from his Father, technically what his Father's mission was for that day, and wanting to join in him and what he's doing, I I can consciously say that in the last year of my life, I've done this on and off for 30 years, but in the last year, I say to my wife, honey, I got nothing. I'll see you in an hour. And an hour later, after spending time just reading, even if it's just one chapter of a New Testament or Old Testament or the Psalms or Proverbs, I have too much because you can't shut me up. And I go and I'm a different husband to my wife. I think I'm a different neighbor. I think I'm a different father, grandfather. And in a day where so much misrepresentation is thrown at us from every angle imaginable, all sides, then where do you go to find absolute truth? And for me, I think the scriptures are absolute divine truth. When you compare literally the historical evidence of the documents of scripture to any other document on planet Earth, nothing compares. Nothing compares. But more than that, when you actually do read it, it comes alive and you come alive in it. I think Cecil B. DeMille, I have as a quote on my email. Cecil B. DeMille directed the Ten Commandments many years ago. And he said, as I did the research on doing the Ten Commandments, I realized I didn't, let's see, how did he say it? I didn't read the Bible, it read me.
Wow.
And so I want to be read because I want to be as good as of a man as I can be to my neighbor, to my family, to my fellow casting directors.
I love that. Mark, you are such a gift, a gem. We're so lucky to have you. I feel so lucky to call you friend and colleague.
Amen.
Thank you so much for giving of yourself, for giving of your faith. You are such a light. So keep it up. Thank you so much.
Well, you are too, and that's why I always want to be around you, because you bring the best out of me, and you bring the best out of. That's why I believe God's chosen you to do what you do, because I'm sure you've always brought the best out of every actor that came in the room with you.
I so appreciate that, Mark. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Give it up for Mark Fincannon.
Thank you.